Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, as we have a significant number of you waiting for us in the audience, we will not keep you waiting any longer, and I welcome you to this discussion on data as a new currency. I'm Declan Curry. I've been a journalist and a broadcaster reporting on business and the economy for more than 25 years, mainly for BBC television and radio, but also independently in print and online. And I've chaired conferences around the globe. I'm delighted to be here with you as your moderator today. This panel is going to explore data as a new currency. We have three of our number on the platform with me already, so please allow me to welcome to you Jaana Sinipuro, Jaanika Merilo, and Gabriel Czech. Give them a round of applause to welcome them to the discussion. Some applause.
Hi.
Thank you. We are also expecting to be joined by Jakub, Jaňura in the course of the discussion. More and more of our actions are being captured as data with mobile phones, Fitbit, Siri, and Alexa. That data is increasingly detailed and personal. The amount of data that we generate is going to explode as machines connected to the internet become more common, and advances in machine learning and AI mean more of that data can actually be analyzed and interpreted. So how do we use this wealth of information to improve government and public services? Does this increase use of data enhance our democracy or threaten it? And how do citizens extract the value from data about them without sacrificing privacy, security, or even their identity? Just a few of the questions for our panelists to chew over and to discuss. Let me make some more precise introductions. On the right of the stage, as you're looking at it, to my left is Jaana Sinipuro, who's the project director at the Finnish Innovation Fund, Sitra. Next to her is Gabriel Czech, who's head of public policy for Central and Eastern Europe for Facebook. And then next to her on the right of the stage, as you are looking at it, is Jaanika Merilo, who's an advisor to ministers of infrastructure and also an advisor to mayors in a number of cities and towns. So welcome to the three of you to our discussion. We also welcome your input. You can ask your questions through Slido. You're familiar with how that works already now on your web browser. Go to slido.com. The code is PES2019. Click on the main hall, then select the tab that says questions, and we'll also take questions the old-fashioned way using voice technology. We'll bring your questions in as soon as it feels appropriate to do so. So the brief that we've been given for our discussion today, panelists, is while big data helps governments by providing them with accurate policy analysis, it also increases risks related to data privacy and to potential misuse. Jaanika, from your perspective of someone who's advised policymakers, advised ministers, advised mayors, how does data help and hinder government and policy making?
Yes, hello everyone. Well, I think it's a very twisted question, because from one side you need data for decision making, which means if you want to run efficient city, efficient ministry, you need certain amount of data. Then again, it's a question of how you use and store the data. You can gather, you can collect everything, but question is, do you open it as an open data, which could be used by any other company for, let's say, commercial purposes? Do you open it for citizens so that it can be used for greater good, for social benefits, or you just use it for your own decision making? So it's not so much about what you gather, but how you process it and whom you give the access. I think Estonia is a very good example. It's a small country, 1.3 million people, but I think it's true e-government country, which means all the processes are online. You can basically do everything. Since a child is born, everything is like online. So government basically knows everything, which means starting from your identification code, you're just a number, and it follows you through all the life cycle, and everything is like digital. But then again, the government doesn't have access to everything. You don't have a God, one God who knows everything about you. Government can access data for decision making, can have big data or analyze, for example, the medical trends based on the previous diagnosis, or the transportation trends or efficiency based on certain routes. But there is no God who would say that, I see your personal profile better than you do. So it's not so much about gathering the data, it's about the using, opening, and whether you take advantage of it or not. But of course you need it for policy making, because good policies are based on the real life. Real life is based on gathering the data.
Jaana, and this is exactly the point. The data gives us such a wealth of information and potential, but safeguards need to be in place.
Yes, safeguards need to be in place, and I guess that there's a role for regulation as well, ensuring the privacy issues and the trust from the citizens. But at the same time, I think there's also a big movement raising around the my data. So I think consumers, citizens are getting more and more aware of the rights regarding the data. So I think it's very important to differ between different sources of data and different types of data, regulated and unregulated data, IoT data, open data. That's a diverse source of different kind of, and need for different kind of regulation and different kind of usage. So.
Yes, no, I totally
so
agree.
You were nodding in agreement.
No,
so,
I
yes.
was nodding because in one hand we're trying to open as much as data as possible to people so that they can make open data applications which benefit, let's say, all the people. From the other side, we're trying to understand where is the border between too personal or overall. So I absolutely agree that it's all about borders and control mechanisms and how do you define personal or just statistics.
Jaana, it opens up interesting questions about what the end goal is, what the purpose is in the use of data in our politics and in our polity. Is it simply to improve efficiency? Is it to boost transparency? Is it to increase participation and accountability, or some mix of all of those?
Yeah, I guess in Finland there's a quite good example where we are trying to balance between those different needs, like this new legislation on secondary use of healthcare and welfare data. It's a GDPR-aligned local legislation that tries to improve access to data and enable innovations, but at the same time we are very concerned about how to take care of the anonymization and what are the relevant uses of that data, because it's a sensitive data and it's health-related data. So we are implementing the legislation and seeing how the actual interpretation and use cases should be built. But the original idea was to broaden the possibilities for research, academic research, but innovations and commercial use as well.
Gabriella, just on the basic idea, the starting point, does better data lead to better government, lead to better policy?
Could, of course. If the government use those data with care, and if you find the right balance. When people are using more and more applications, there are more and more data out there. That data could be opened, that data could be used. I don't see a dichotomy that there's more data used for public purposes, so that means that people have less privacy. Data sharing can be done in a privacy-protected way, and not only can be done, but must be done in a privacy-protected way, let it be a government or let it be a private company. We at Facebook, because I'm representing Facebook here, we are as well participating in projects where we are using the data that we have for public good and for public welfare, improving public welfare. We work with NGOs globally and with some governments globally in our Data for Good project. And if any of you know our product called Disaster Map, that can give you a bit of an idea that whenever there is a disaster struck, or where there is a health outbreak, then our disaster map and the data that we have in the disaster map helps NGOs and humanitarian organizations to do their work better and in a very timely manner. Here, of course, we do not provide individual data or data about individuals to the NGOs, but we are providing aggregated, anonymized data. For the NGOs. But in a way, I just wanted to start with a concrete example how data can be used for public good. In Boston, there is an app that every taxi driver must download, and every driver who is driving a city-owned vehicle must download. Whenever the taxi driver drives and sees a pothole on the street, they must just tap the app. The app is connected to GPS, and the city council collects the data, so the city council has a real-time information about where are the potholes, so they know that what should be their plan, how do they have to repair, how big is the pothole, so what resources they need, what's the timeline they can do the job. That's a very tiny, benign example of a small app for good, but there are certainly bigger and more robust countrywide level examples as well.
Jaanika.
Absolutely supported. Also, there is a Waze, and for example, several cities in Ukraine use Waze in order to get constant feedback about the traffic jams, about the potholes, as you said, about the in real life situations. But I would like to give a small real life case from the open data, privacy, and so on. There is a medical services provider in Ukraine, which basically has created the biggest e-health solution. The solution is free for the government. So government can use it and implement it. It's basically, you can book doctor's time online, you have a patient record and receipts or prescriptions. So basically it's free, and the government is happy, the cities are happy because it's basically for free. Then again, it's commercial enterprise, or it's a company which needs also to get resources from somewhere. So it commercialized, for example, the suggestion-making engine. Basically, it's all free until a doctor prescribes your medicine. And then the system analyzes and says, this medicine is available in the pharmacy close to you, by this address. So basically, they are not trading personal data. So basically, they're doing it for greater use because it's free for government. Basically, they don't have all details about the patient, but still they're using certain elements of private data. So this is always the question, how much is too much? And then again, if the companies cannot benefit, they will not survive. We need sustainable companies. So to a certain level, they probably should have access to data as long as it doesn't hurt you. But when does it hurt you?
Is the argument here that people are less concerned about privacy when they see the benefit in the improved service?
And you have trust, which is the most important issue. It's trust services, basically, that you know that it wouldn't be used against you, basically.
Which suggests, Jaana, that privacy, and we'll talk about privacy in more detail a little bit later, but as it's now come up in the discussion, that privacy may not be an absolute demand or requirement on the part of the citizenry. If they see a benefit to giving away some of their privacy, they might do so willingly.
Yeah, I think that there's also those data breaches and some other things have raised more awareness on the privacy issues. Still, maybe citizens value more the easy use of applications, the value from the services they are getting from the apps. So I don't really know. I think we made some surveys about the citizen. Of course, they need to trust on the digital services and on digital applications, but still, I think the convenience is the number one point when using services.
I think privacy does not get less important, but it gets more important with time. And we learned as well this in a hard way. And as I said, as you said, trust is the key component here. When companies build products that use data their users. Then when the user is confident and trusting the service, they know what they are expecting and they feel that they get what they are expecting, then there is trust. When that trust is diminished, then the business is not good, the user turns away. But the second point, what I want to emphasize here is what we see currently on our services, and why I said that privacy is not getting less important. It's not that people feel that will be certainly used for a good purpose, so I'm fine with giving my data. No, people get much more privacy focused. We see that those products of ours are getting more popular, which have a very strong privacy features. So like ephemeral stories on Facebook and on Instagram, stories that disappear within a day, or direct conversations that are encrypted, and closed groups. These are features where people feel that they are owning the sphere, but they feel that they have an intimate conversation, that they are sharing, that they are connected with people only whom they want to be connected, and that they are sharing data only with whom they want to be connected. And that the content that they are sharing is not sticking to them. We see that people do not want to have a story that they shared 20 years ago or 15 years ago still lingering around. So people do not want to build a library of their content and carry that with them. So we see this new trend, and that's why we decided that even if open social networking will stay to be very important in the future as well, we feel that in the coming years to come, more privacy-focused networking will become even more important.
Jaanika.
And absolutely support you and love the new principle, right to be forgotten. Everything that I say and do shouldn't be used against me, which is also part of the trust, that I share certain information if I know that I can change my mind.
Thank you. And we know that privacy is important to you because it is the top-rated question on Slido. Remember that as well as asking your questions, you also get to vote on the questions that you think are important. So slido.com on your browser, PES2019 is the code that you need for this event. We will tackle those questions that are listed on the screens around the room. They're showing the questions ranked by the order of importance as is determined by you. You'll also have noticed, as you've been paying attention, that we are joined by an extra voice and participant on the panel. This is Jakub Jaňura, who's from the Czech Ministry of the Interior. He's head of the Unit for Coordination of Public Administration and International Relations. We're very pleased that you've been able to join us, and I'll bring you into the discussion as we progress through some of the points. So we've had an outline sort of overview, a bird's eye view of the use of data to enhance and make public services more efficient and possibly to increase the citizens' engagement with the provision of services, with the range of government and bureaucratic services. And we've touched a little on the payoff that there might be, the trade that there might be between the efficiency and the benefit of the service and the privacy and the right to retain your own data. Jaana, there is a broader point here, which is this engagement between data companies like Facebook, between the bureaucracy and the social service, the government service as well, also builds the foundations for a data economy in Europe in the years ahead.
Yes, I think what we need for a data economy to flourish is, of course, these different types of data and data sources and making data available. But then when you talk about privacy and enabling data sharing, it's also important to bear in mind identity and identity management and this consent-based data sharing. So it should be more transparent, and it should be maybe based on your dynamic consent, what kind of usages you allow for your data. So when you're talking about personal data, I think there's GDPR gives great, not just sanctioning tool, it's not just a sanctioning tool for the companies, against privacy and that kind of things. But it could also, the data portability could be seen as something that promotes the European model for data economy. But then again, it needs to be based on European values and this trust and transparency. So maybe if we can create some kind of consent architecture, and if we can combine different kind of identities, you don't always need to have a strong identification for using some services. But then for some governmental services, of course, there needs to be a strong identification. So these different layers, different types of data, different types of IDs, there's huge, it's a big problem, but it's also a big opportunity, talking about data economy.
Gabriella, the puzzle this poses for corporations, for the data companies, is how to take that idea of dynamic shifting permissions and build an infrastructure that permits that flexibility, that fluidity.
When we gather data, or when a user uses Facebook, then it's not that they either turn on their privacy or turn it off, but the privacy setting is extremely granular. You can decide each time when you post something, whether you want to post it globally, or you want to post it only to your friends, or only to a set of your friends. You can decide whether you want to be tagged on a photo and everyone can see that I'm sitting here and I'm tagged on the photo and I'm happy with that, or I do not want you to even upload that photo and I reach out to you on a messenger and tell you that, please remove that. So the settings are extremely granular, and it fits not that where the user is located, whether he or she is in the US or in the EU, not whether what we use that data for, whether we use that data for a disaster map, or whether we use that to service personalized ad to one of our clients. But the data is solely, the control of the data is solely with the user. The user decides in each and every situation that what's the extent they are about to share the privacy of the data.
Well, yes, I understand that, but in practical terms, you set the privacy settings the first time you use Facebook, and you very rarely change them after that. The potential to do it is there, but do people really look at the privacy settings of every single post?
They don't have to do it every single post, but there are many people who do that. And for example, and we are teaching and educating people to do that. For example, the default setting, let's say for an 18-year-old, is that they can only share it to friends only. If you are above 18, like you or I, we can share it to friends of friends, or bigger circle. So we intervened already with the 18 years old. They can change that setting. Let's say an under 18 decides that they want to post something global. He does that today, and when next day they want to post again to global, then we are pushing them a message that your privacy setting is set to global. Are you sure you want to retain that? Do you know what does it mean? Global setting means that everyone in the world will see that. Are you sure you want to do that? So, but the question what really lies behind what I guess that you are going to is whether people are conscious of the controls that they have. Companies can build the best ever control mechanisms if people are not using that. We had the huge GDPR debate here in Europe. We reached a kind of compromise that everyone can live with, and companies are tasked with developing a very granular control setting and consent setting. The question is whether the users are using those settings, whether users are actually deciding about their data. And here again, some of the responsibility lies with the companies, some of the responsibility lies with governments, that we have to educate the users. There is a need for data literacy. What we do is that we changed how our platform looks like, how our newsfeed looks like, so that there's an easier, quick access to the settings, that we do much more inline education. You have a point there, that when a person wants to post something on Facebook, they will not read the privacy settings. That's not the moment when you have to educate them, because they just want to hit the button of share.
Okay, hang on, Jaana.
There was a nice study made in US. It takes average 52 days for an average person to read through all the web services here using the user terms. So I think that it's a full-time job for one day. So I think there's a big need for simplifying the user terms and making, as you said, educating users and make it maybe in a more human-driven way.
Jaanika.
Yes, I wanted to bring a twist to this conversation. It's easy when you can control your on and off button, let's say, what I publish, what I don't, or government can turn it on. But for example, if we take the video picture, it's very popular to have the safe cities, which means cameras that are city open public cameras following you around. I actually don't know where the cameras are located. So where is this red line between I'm taking my evening walk with a person and this is my personal data versus this is public space? So I think in written data it's easier. It's either public or private, but there is a certain gray line when you haven't allowed actually, but it's kind of common knowledge, but you're not aware of and you cannot really turn it off. And this is a hard case.
Gabriella, I don't want you to feel that we're ganging up on you, but...
We do not have surveillance cameras on the street, so I absolutely don't feel that I'm on the spot.
I don't think Facebook has surveillance cameras in the street.
But actually, you were talking about privacy settings for posting and sharing, and that's a good and interesting contribution to the discussion. But actually, what users may not feel they have any control over is the data that is then provided by you to advertisers. Where is the control over that so that we have more control over the messages that are sent back to us by advertisers?
Yeah. How you framed your question, that already shows that we have a problem because we do not provide data of users to the advertiser. And I say it now, I said it yesterday, I'm saying this since years, and all of us are saying this since years, and still it's out there. So still we haven't done a good job enough. It's important that people understand that we do not sell their data to advertisers, we do not give the data to advertisers. What we do is that we have a request from an advertiser that they want to, let's say, advertise people to women who live in Prague, women who are under 40, who have kids and who are about to buy a car. We know our user space and we are serving ads to that user space. We do not let the advertisers know that who received the ad, whether Gabi, if I were living in Prague, and if I were under 40, which I'm not anymore, unfortunately. So anyway, whether I would receive that ad or not, but the advertiser will know that there had been 15,000 people in Prague who have seen your ad in the last 1 week. The point here is that we do have to make sure that people understand how we are delivering ads. And since GDPR, again, when we ramped up our privacy check in education, we as well ramped up the education to the users that why we are collecting the data, what we are using the data for, and that how we are delivering ads. You can personalize your ad setting. You can decide whether why you can check, and maybe I invite all of you to check this out, that you can check out why did you receive that ad. If you are using Facebook, with one easy click you can see that you are receiving this ad because you are interested in these stories, because you checked into this restaurant, and so on and so on. And you can change that setting, so you cannot say that I don't want to have ads at all. But you can say that I want to have a personalized ads along these parameters, or you can say that I don't want to have personalized ads, and then you will get all the ads that are out there and might not be that relevant for you, so that might not be that a nice experience.
As a quick test, put your hand up if you feel that you are in control of the information that you provide on social media. Sites like Facebook. Hands up if you feel that you are in control of that, the use of that information. And hands up if you feel that you are not in control.
Yeah, that's a very critical audience.
Even this esteemed and learned audience is not convinced.
No, this is a very critical learned audience, and as I said, we have job to do so that people really do feel that they are in control of their data. It's more education.
Jaanika.
Yes, again, example for Estonia. Besides the legislation, it's also a good example of how you control also your data which you give to government. It's not only commercial platforms or companies, it's also in Estonian case, for example, I as a citizen see everything the government does with my data. Who accessed my data, who's asked certain questions, who viewed my records and so on. So I constantly have total control over my data and can ask questions why this let's say, worker in certain ministry accessed my data. It's also important that it's not about trust, it's about control mechanisms.
Jakub, we haven't heard from you yet.
Good afternoon from me. Very sorry for being late. And from my side, last year in Czech Republic was the year of GDPR. Maybe on this summit you experienced something like this. And this year there are some echoes from the year. We are very recently trying to work with big data on the Ministry of Interior. That's why I'm here today. And the work after GDPR is significantly different than like 2 years before. And there is a lot of pressure on being, well, you know what various companies are gathering about you. And when we are working with such data, we need to argument very carefully on what kind of data we are working with. We are recently working on a project of mobility mapping of citizens to set the network of public administration against such mobility patterns like commutation, everyday commutation to some centers in the Czech Republic. And we have tried some pilot projects, and these arguments that we get from these projects are very good, very perfect, precious data, but we can't absolutely see anything about the population itself. We just simply can't get to that one individual to know his or her gender, age, very simple things that mobile operators have. We just can't have them. There's GDPR, the data maybe, they are flowing somewhere in the air, but there is a very strict line. When we need to work with the data, we just need to erase it, exactly as you said.
Yes, I have the question actually. You said that you cannot pinpoint it down to one person, but if you're monitoring the cameras, then you probably have an access to face recognition and see whether this is this person you're looking for or not, or this number plate, which is stolen car or don't, which is already a little bit pinpointing.
Yes, when you are in the streets of Prague, there are so-called blue zones. You are parking your car there, and there is a system that is detecting your ID of your car, and there are some fees you are paying when you are parking wrong. So it's already in the process, these systems, but there have to be very carefully cared who has the access to the system, this is the thing, and who has the outputs of the system. When you are driving the car, you don't know the names of the people, but somewhere in the system just need to push.
Yes, so basically have an access to data down to people, but it's how you use it. That's what we discussed previously.
Jaana.
And I think there's many great initiatives at the smart cities side that how you can know what the cameras are for, who's installing those, what's the purpose of they taking pictures. So there are many great movements towards more openness also in a very personal data and in the smart cities side. So I think there's good initiatives around.
I just thought I'd give an example of how we do this. When I mentioned that we do share data with NGOs in the disaster map in a privacy protected way. So for example, in the 2018 Californian wildlife fires, we were working with Red Cross and local NGOs that were setting up shelters for people who were running away from the fires. And the NGOs had the trouble that they have to, in real life, give support and deploy their resources. And there were five shelters, and we could see in the data that people were going into 3 shelters, but they were not going to the other 2. So very quickly, the NGO could find out that, okay, one of the shelters had a roadblock because a tree has fallen over, and the 5th shelter was a bit away from the affected area, so that's why people were not going there. So they could redistribute their resources very quickly. In situations like this, time really matters. But how we share the data is not that we are sharing all the personal data, but we are sharing it in an aggregated and anonymized way. NGOs have to sign a data sharing agreement. They have to have a special login access to that aggregated data. And disaster map is not giving they're not telling them that Gabi is running to this shelter, but what we tell the NGOs is that 10 people or 100 people are running to this shelter and 15 to the other shelter. Actually, disaster map is using small tiles, so they aggregate the data, and there are one tile equals to 360 square meter, and that's how the data is broken down.
You're rummaging there. You've pulled out some sort of map.
Yeah, I'm cheating a little bit. I have a map with me, so I just wanted to show you, or to the audience, there's a good custom in Czech Republic of showing people some pictures that they can't recognize on a far away distance. So this is just to illustrate the issue we do. We have some kind of sun stars that showing the aggregated numbers of people commuting to one center. And this is what you said exactly. We don't know the identity, we just know the numbers. And especially in the situations of crisis, which is not my department's job, but police department worked with it. There was quite recently a discussion about Prague subway and the mobile data. You need to know how many people are there just in the moment in the subway station in case of some, some problem. And this is exactly the situation that you need such data.
Jaana.
Maybe I would like to go back to this question about data platforms and business side, because too often we are thinking the GDPR as more like a privacy topic and personal data topic, but there's this data portability article saying that I have a right and get access to my personal data, but it's not very easy. It takes 2 months, it's not in a machine usable form. So what we are now thinking and talking with the EU Commission about is maybe to make a next wave like data sharing platforms available. So if I as an individual could ask for my personal data from different service or data holders and then give permit to service provider to use my personal data and make that, we have a good regulation in PSD2 for banking sector opening up APIs.
Which involves the sharing of financial information.
Yeah.
That a customer has given a bank. The banks are required to provide that information to competitor services.
Yes, unfortunately incentives haven't been so clear there, but if we can kind of use the idea and maybe rephrase the GDPR as an enabler and create those rules and guidelines on how the data sharing should look. So maybe we have a way to balance between the user-initiated data sharing and this increased amount of smaller companies to be able to join on the data economy side.
The importance of the comparison being that we regard information about money, about our finances, as some of the most private information, aside from perhaps about our own health, and yet here is legislation that requires the sharing of that very personal information for a broader purpose.
Oh God, I'm gonna speak again about Estonia. It's a right to be forgotten, basically. So government knows everything by definition, but still I have these plugs and switches to turn off certain information. For example, I have to declare my taxes annually, and it takes me 3 minutes, because really government knows everything, it's very convenient. It's everything that I would be looking for in small documents, government knows. But then again, I always know that I can turn off certain options and have a right to be forgotten also in a good way. For example, I can hide from my doctor that I have certain disease, because it's right on a basis. She doesn't have to know that I have some disease if she's not using this data. My travels, my trips, my transport information, I have all the switches to say, you don't need to know that. This is my private data. But of course, there is also a personal Data Act or Private Data Act which says that you are right to be forgotten besides emergency. For example, I'm telling that you don't have to know about my certain disease, but then it's an emergency situation. I'm taking the emergency room, I'm without consciousness, I cannot make my own decisions, maybe doctor has to know. So there is also a balance about what you're sharing, and in case of someone has an access to save your life, it's always about balance as well, probably.
Just a few of the, sorry, Gabriella, please go ahead.
Well, I just thought to make a point that there's a huge difference when we talk about open data for the public sector, and we were talking about data portability for private companies. Having said, because here now we are talking about companies who are competing with each other, who have competing services, and who do not offer the same services. So you can imagine yourself that you are using Seznam here in the Czech Republic. How surprised you would be if suddenly your data would appear, let's say, on Facebook, and Facebook would come to you with an offer that, hey, we know that you are doing this and that, wouldn't you want to use our service? That's not the way to do that. On the other hand, data portability, as you said, is one of the core key regulatory issues that we must get right if we want to have the future of internet cleared. And if you read Mark Zuckerberg's post recently, when he was very forward-going and he said that we need new regulation worldwide for the internet, he named 4 topics, and one was data portability. But data portability is very tricky. Currently, what people can do is that, like on Facebook, they are downloading their data, they are opening, signing up for another service, and then they are uploading whatever they can from that data there. There must be an easier way of doing that, but because of technical reasons as well, but because of privacy reasons as well, it's extremely tricky. We are now cooperating with Microsoft, Twitter, and other corporations in a pilot project. It's called Data Transfer Project, to figure out the technical and legal boundaries how data portability can be done in an effective way and in a user-friendly way. But here, especially the personalized privacy settings, like one post is open to me, the other post is open to 20 other thousand people, that makes it extremely tricky and technically very difficult and legally very difficult.
We have some questions on this area, and thank you for asking your questions on Slido. Please continue to do so. Towards the bottom of the screen here are Bartholomew Cott. You cannot individualize data because the software does not allow you to do that, or because there is a legal restriction. Not entirely clear which one is at play here. Any of you were able to pick that point up and provide that clarification?
It depends what we are talking about, really, I guess.
When we're talking about individualizing data and allowing portability as well, of course, are there obstacles? Because technically it's very difficult, or because the law doesn't allow you to?
No, because the law doesn't allow it.
And yes, and of course, some forms of data are very difficult to match with the individuals, but what my thinking is that maybe we managed to create kind of IBAN code for transferring financial data about my money, and that's basically combining the data about an entity, organization, a person, and monetary information. So if we can combine my permit, my ID, not the strong ID, but some kind of identification, to data ID and a service provider who holds my data, and then create some technical capabilities, then we may have, you were mentioning data transfer project, and that's a very good start for simple information exchange, like basic information from me, and then, of course, the technical challenges increase if you go to the actual metadata level transfer of data. But we are doing some experiments, and I think that it's something we should strive for.
Absolutely,
yeah. Jaanika, please.
Yes, thank you. It depends. But I think Ukraine is one of the, let's say, coolest countries in regards to open data, which means starting from zero, government has made open by default. Basically, everything that is government data should be opened. And it is magic which you can do with open data as well, not just personal data. For example, there is a startup court on your palm, which allows you to check in regards court cases, let's say which people have been sued with certain misbehavior, with whom he has interacted, with whom he has mutual businesses. These businesses have won public procurements, and who is like engaged with whom in what kind of, let's say, schemes or business interaction and so on. It's all based on open data. But it's really magic that you can do so many interesting things, individualizing, but not personal data, but open data. It's magic, really.
Thank you. We're answering the question that's highlighted on your screen. Let's look at the one that's now beneath that. A question from Lucas with 6 people voting for it. Should the government have access to your private phone-generated data in the case of emergency or humanitarian crisis? We've sort of discussed this a little bit already, but this actually drills down to the nub of it. Should governments have an absolute right to this data, whether you like it or not?
You're asking me, I say maybe yes, but in some cases, definitely. In some kind of crisis like the fire in California, as you mentioned, or, I don't know, bomb attack in some kind of metro subway stations, that definitely should have. There should be someone or some scheme or some algorithm deciding whether yes or whether not. And this algorithm should be as transparent as possible. And I'm not sure whether such algorithm existing already somewhere. It should be very interesting, I think, for discussion of something like this. But in some kind of data that are as anonymous as possible, I think that the government should have the access. But not, we don't need to know whether it is you or you. I absolutely don't need to know to set the network of public administration. I just need to know there is 200,000 of people. And this is completely different task. So it depends, as well as you said, it depends on the matter of task, and there should be a very transparent algorithm deciding whether yes or not.
Please do jump in.
But it's always a possibility of creating a monster. That you want, with the best intentions, to create the possibility to access, but how you control that someone doesn't just misbehave, I'm sorry.
What are your concerns?
That if you give access in certain cases, how do you really define that this is the critical case? Which means, for example, there is a government which chooses to totally, let's say, be a dictator, misbehave, use the personal data, and he technically has an access. What are the control mechanisms? So this is always when you give, besides exception, you create a certain mechanism of misbehavior.
Yeah, I really like exactly as I can, the idea of very educated customer or citizen. Or this is on part of government, to educate its citizens to know their rights, to be as emancipated as possible according to the data.
Educated government as well?
Definitely. I believe we have educated governments.
Gabriela, this must be refreshing for you. It makes a change from all the discussions about can we trust companies with data. Now we're asking, can we trust governments with it?
And it is an extremely valid question for us as well. But as you can see from the debate, there is no unified answer to that, and I think never will be. This is always a discussion, and it's always a deal between the citizen and the government, and the citizen who's a user, the user and the company. And these deals, these agreements will be very different in each and every country. If the Czech citizens feel comfortable with their government, they can make a deal that when they are ready to give up their data for government use. And I'm pretty sure that Ukrainians would feel differently, and people in Taiwan will feel differently, or in Russia, or you can name every other country in the US. I can give you a concrete example how we see that. At Facebook, we have a project that we want to protect our users from suicide and harm. When a user reports to us that their friend has suicidal posts, we prioritize it, psychologists are quickly reviewing it, and when we assess that there is an imminent suicide risk, then we must take action. And now we're talking about minutes. There are countries where the law allows us to reach out to the safety organization, the suicide prevention link, and to tell that this is the user, this is their phone number, the user is having very serious suicide thoughts, please make the call. And the the suicide hotline is able to reach out actively to the suicidal user. In many countries, like in the EU, where GDPR is in place, we are not able to give that data to the organizations. So what we do is that we go back to the user, the affected user, and as well to the user who reported, and say that there is help, you are not alone, phone this hotline, the suicide hotline. But you understand, you see that there is a huge difference. I don't say that this is better if we can reach out and give the users data. I just wanted to give you one concrete example, but I do think that everyone has to make that decision themselves and on country level.
Jaana, this is about getting the bits to join together.
Yeah, and I think there are, again, different types of data and different grading of data. That's partially an answer to this, that we should have the ethical guidelines and public-private partnerships defining kind of rules on how to, what's truly a sensitive data and what are the appropriate cases of using the data also for the government. And I think the tracking of the location data or using an app where you can, if you make an emergency call and you can send your exact location data to the authorities and police coming after you, that's almost clearly a good case. But then there's some other kind of cases where it's much more, it's not so clear.
Yeah. And your worry is that by fixing the rules to allow these good episodes to happen, you leave the door open to misuse.
It's not my worry, I just bring up the point that it's never black and white. But yes, I agree, sir, with emergency calls. For example, in Estonian law, you have by definition, if you have an emergency call and your battery dies, they send out the emergency services by definition, because probably they should locate you because you called and you're probably in some danger, yeah.
And having your phone number is certainly different than having the script of your conversation.
Yeah.
The next question is a fairly pointed observation. Shouldn't we put people in control of their data rather than just making them feel that they're in control of their data? In other words, stop talking about it, get on and do it.
Okay, me? Okay. I understand the difference, and as I said, that this is something that we are doing. In the past 20 months, we have done over 30 so-called design jams. The design jams are when we are gathering design engineers who are designing privacy tools and who are designing control functions for our platform, together with government experts, with privacy NGOs, representatives of the customers. And in those design jams throughout Europe, we've been kind of hacking, figuring out that we want to understand well that why users do not really feel that they are in control, why they have the notion that they are not in control, what do we have to change on product and service level so that they are immediately feeling and they are using these privacy control tools better. So kind of that's where we are now, and this is a constant product and service iteration.
Thank you.
Got the point.
Yes, I had a certain case where the Russian media was attacking me because I'm in Ukrainian government, let's say, and it was clear attack by Russian media. So I said to Google, I have a right to be forgotten because it's obviously not only the fake news but orchestrated fake news. Google said, bad luck, you're a public person, you have no rights after all. So I completely agree. It would be very nice to be in charge of your personal, let's say, data and image, not just to be used.
Yeah, misinformation and freedom of speech,
yes.
That's a different topic than privacy. And now what we are talking about is where is the limit of your freedom of speech, whether you are allowed to lie, what is defamation, and where are the legal boundaries. So that's a very complicated, that's another panel discussion, but I'm happy to go into that.
But it's also about private data and controlling personal data and how it is used against you or for you or so on. For example, if the picture is taken out of Facebook and used in media attack, even though it was for your personal friends, for example, it is also like mixed, meaning that it was for personal use, it got out, for example, for the public use, and you don't have any rights anymore. It was just example about, it's not always about personal, public, the border is mixed sometimes.
But this is enormously important because we would want the use of data to engage the citizenry, to have them take a greater participation in the political decision-making process. And yet the examples we have up to now are of data being used to allow personally targeted, misleading propaganda to be sent via social media during election times.
Oh, that's very good point and a very complex one. And you know that Facebook is extremely sensitive and about election integrity and ensuring election integrity. And kind of this is the second day that we do not have European elections anymore. So our teams are a bit now more relaxed. For example, in Ukraine, soon enough we'll have another election, so our election integrity team will be ramped up. There are several layers of this question. And when a person is targeted because that person is expressing an opinion on a topic of public interest, or when that person is participating in a political discourse, we are very strongly taking the position that we want to protect the freedom of that person to express their opinion, and we want to protect that person from being intimidated against expressing that opinion. You can see that several times, especially against, let's say, female candidates. We have changed our policies, for example, on revenge porn and on rape jokes, exactly because of this discussion. On Facebook, you can have cruel jokes, but because many times these jokes were used to intimidate candidates, intimidate politicians, discouraging people from participating in public discourse, we have stepped up the level of our protection, and in order of safety, we are restricting freedom of speech. There can be several discussions, and this is a safety angle. The misinformation part is a different one, and kind of hacking your account and taking your photo from your account and republishing it, that's a third case, and taking your public photo and republishing it and making it part of a public discourse about you, that's again a different one. So it's difficult, it's a very complex issue, like the misinformation as well, and how we protect the public sphere in political discourse and during a campaigning period. But what I want to say is that these are different layers and different topics, and we have to tackle these topics separately. When we're talking about fake accounts, we can talk about CIB, inauthentic behaviors that are attacking people and misleading the conversation, misinformation, false news, discouraging false news, denoting false news. These are all several different layers, or security of candidates and their accounts.
Well, no, it was my personal account, which wasn't hacked. It was targeted, for example, to my friends, which I clearly choose as an audience. But let's say you can screenshot and put it out there, which means there is also the limit. We understand that what you see in Facebook, you cannot always control, but because it's still like for the wide public to see. Anyone can screenshot, anyone can spread it. So it's also, when you understand, when you publish something in social media, it will start living out there. And it's also probably understanding that it's not always controlled, and that you're willing to take this risk that it will be out there. Because again, you have screenshot, it's done and it's out. So it's not always about the plugs, which you can switch in and switch out. You understand that it could be out, not depending on you.
Thank you, Jaana.
Maybe that's one area where public sector and government can show some example, like the national broadcasting company in Finland is doing campaign called showing how these fake news, how they spread, and kind of educating citizens in different topics. And I think that's a perfect example where we can raise, where the public sector has a great role in raising awareness, and as you said, it's different categories and different use cases, so public sector agencies can both show a good example and share some best practices on data usage, but also educate citizens. I think that's one of the key roles government should have.
Educate them to say, if you share information on social platforms, you have, by its very nature, given up your right to privacy with that information.
Yeah, but still I think it's a little bit biased to talk just about social media platforms, because it's so vast. Basically, every minute in our lives is nowadays digital information and data. So it's not just this. I think the public discussion is very much focused on social media and social media companies, but it's this awareness building needs to be broader than that.
Okay, it's wider than that.
Yeah.
Let me ask the question a different way. Who has the authority, who has the muscle to defend the individual against the technology companies, against governments that may misuse information that's been given in good faith? Who can do that?
I think there are many NGOs, and this My Data movement is a very good kind of starting point for this increased awareness of digital rights and this openness in data usage. But it's a very group of aware people, and also this idea that personal data storage is of persons being more in control of the use of their data. I think it's just a small amount of people who are willing and are interested about their data. So that's not a solution that individuals, by getting the actual control to individual to control being the data operators around their data. That's not the optimal solution. It needs to be some kind of public-private exercise, and NGOs.
Jakub, who defends the citizen? Who has the ability to do so?
I think it should be the state itself as well.
Yeah.
The state is the one who sets the rules, who says what's right, what's wrong. GDPR is a good example. So if the state, under the influence of citizens, it's like a circle, there and back, makes a wrong policy, then the citizens should highlight it and back through the politicians. I believe in some heuristic circle. It should come back and in turns be slowly, gradually improved. I don't believe in the legislation that is good in the first try. Well, we've written for a few laws, well, it needed some polishing. So during this circle, I think it's good, and very strong. So in Czech Republic, there is a very strong civil society and sphere of NGOs who are, I think, pinpointing the issues of personal data, privacy, especially openness of data. This is, I think, a very, very good, even political issue, and very strong political point. So, such sphere of NGOs, which recently almost won the European elections, the party that comes from this, environment. So, this is the way for me to set the right trends, but it's quite a long way because the elections are every 4 years, and you don't. Well, there may be a few, even tens of thousands of people on the squares in Prague recently, and this is not, I think, everyday struggle. This can't be everyday struggle. There should be some mechanism to maybe make the circle a bit faster, and we should be looking for it. And well, we call it participation and participatory mechanisms.
Yeah.
And this is even in the strategy, well, I have with me in the strategy of development of public administration to strengthen these participatory mechanisms. It's very, very important for me. Not to let the NGOs scream on the squares, make their voice really valid and listen to it.
Jaana.
Go ahead. Please. I just wanted to make kind of maybe the distinction between individual privacy cases and product and service development phase and the legislative phase, like the forward going. As you know, privacy is the other big territory that Mark Zuckerberg has named explicitly, that this is where we must strike a global agreement. And we are very much advocating that in the US, a new privacy legislation similar to the European GDPR should be in place. When it comes to, so there is a need for stronger privacy regulation where citizens, the users, the governments, and the companies, the industry, are coming to an agreement that what are the principles that should be safeguarded, how that control is there and should stay at the citizen, and how companies should be developing those controls, but still having the flexibility so that they can build a digital economy and can survive in this competitive marketplace. The other part is product and service development, and currently, like with GDPR in Europe, we do have the data protection office officers. And whenever, like for example, Facebook, whenever we have a new product, before the launch of the product, we are consulting with the Irish Data Protection Officer, who is our oversight body here in Europe, where we are based in Ireland, so we are under the auspice of the Irish Data Protection Officer, and we are discussing with them that this is how the product will look like. Internally within the company, we do have a built-in privacy assessment from the very first thoughts till the finalization of the product. But when we are ready to launch it, before that, we go to the privacy officer, say that this is the product that we are about to launch. Do you as well feel that this is okay, this in compliance with the GDPR and our legal obligations? And when we have the clearance, then we say that, okay, then we are ready to go. We are not obliged to do that, but why we are doing that, because otherwise it doesn't make sense to launch a product that is against GDPR, that is against our legal obligations. We do not want to make business with breaking the law. And the third case is that when there is an individual data breach, and then users can go to their privacy officers and they can start a case, or they can kind of mitigate their personal risks.
Yes, sorry, hopping back in regards to who is responsible is a very good example again from the real life. Real life in Estonia, that there is a Personal Data Act which regulates who has access to personal data. And for example, the policeman came to work, this is real life, real case, in the morning and had an access to basically demographic register to see who lives where, basically. And he had a friend, and friend called in the morning and said that my husband left me, can you please tell me where he lives? Real life, not kidding. And he took a look at the register, he saw where the husband lives, he told the address, and husband asked, how did he know that? Or how did she know that? Checked into his personal cabinet. There is a personal cabinet where you can see all the data which has been accessed by government. Basically, there is a track record of access and requests. And saw that policeman asked for his personal data. Real case, and asked, why did he ask for it? By the law, he had no access. Yes, technically he had, but he had no right to access it. He brought it to court and won a case really. So the answer is everyone is responsible. You for like observing and controlling the data, government for setting the regulations, court if needed, everyone basically, yeah?
Yes. I was mentioning educated citizen, educated state, but there is a lot of officers in between, well, in municipalities and so on. Generally, the mayors in municipalities have access to personal registers of inhabitants. Exactly the same issues as you said. If a mayor somehow investigated in such register, there is a track, digital track inside it. And this is, or not mayor or some officer, this is about to be fired from the work and forever. This is total no-go and data breach. And I think that maybe some of the people think it's okay, I can do. And it's a lot about education of these people.
Jaana, sorry, you were also had a point to make in this round of the discussion.
Not sure if I have any reason. No, I very much second on what you are saying, that yeah.
There are a couple of questions arise from it, and they're reflected in the questions that you're asking on Slido as well, and thank you for your continuing questions about how you effectively regulate technology companies, given their size, given their dominance in a market that is asymmetrical. Antitrust laws as they currently exist don't do it, because even if they forced Google or Facebook to break up, that doesn't change the behavior. National governments can't do it because you haven't got the clout or the strength. These companies are so dominant, national governments on their own haven't got the ability to tackle them.
Well, I don't know what to respond.
What's your plan?
What's our plan about breaking the Facebook?
So how then do we keep companies like yours in check? We can't just rely on your goodwill and good intentions. There have to be mechanisms.
maybe you missed the news about the huge Google fine that was put by the EU Commissioner on Competition on Google, and I guess that's just part of the process that's happening in Europe. But I must contest the statement that lies in your question, that's about dominance. And I strongly feel that size and popularity does not equal to dominance. And whenever you talk to an antitrust lawyer, an antitrust experts, they will tell you that just because a company is big, just because it's popular, a lot of users are using it, it doesn't mean that company is dominant. In the digital sector, there's a huge competition. In whichever apps we are looking at, those apps are competing with other apps in the same market. But on the other hand, I feel that would be for me kind of hiding behind legalistic arguments, because the notion is different. The notion is, I don't think that really the European public has the issue with that Facebook should be broken up because we cannot control it, but there is a feeling that we cannot control what's going on in the digital sphere, that there is a new economy, there is a new world that we are living in this digital world, and we do not really get the control of that. And that's why we said that there is a need of global regulation and thinking about regulating the internet. If we, each and every one of us in this room, 15 years ago or 20 years ago, we knew that what would happen, what life would we live in today, or if we knew that what life we will be living 20 years from now on, certainly would say that no, we do not want to have that laissez-faire. We do want to have it as in a regulated way. It was not done. Internet was a free space. Now the situation has radically changed. So now all of us, governments, civil society, and companies have to come together and come to agreements on those basic big questions: election integrity, privacy, data portability.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask each of the three of you to give your response to that in just a moment, and those will be your last thoughts in this discussion. Among the questions you have been asking, will Facebook finally start paying taxes? Well, you know I'm not going to ask that question, am I? It's not part of this discussion, but I'm sure Gabriela has noted that it is the most popular discussion, the question that is on the screen. How can increasing reliance on big data coexist with traditional values such as respect for individual privacy? We've dealt with that. Does emphasis on privacy undermine the privacy itself, since we are becoming flooded by cookies policies, consent requests which are not capable of study? And Jaana referred to that in one of her answers as well. And shouldn't sensitive data that people themselves publish in social media be protected against profiling and any business use? That is another question that we have answered. Thank you for asking it. What do you think of the EU's antitrust rules? We've just done that one as well. Should measures be applied against the misuse of big data? That one we have answered also. So, panel, thank you very much for answering all of those questions without even realizing that you had done so. Right, some final thoughts. Jaana, if you'd like to start winding the discussion up, please.
Maybe this who will protect the citizens. So I think we'll need large European companies to join with governments to define the new rules for data sharing. I think car manufacturers are generating intelligent manufacturing IoT data, how we can use that to promote European model for data economy. That's one thing, and that will also balance large social media companies. There's huge data research, but we need to redefine and Currently, Europe stands for 3% of the value of data platform companies, and that comes from the Spotify, Zalando, and SAP SAP ERP systems, and that's not really a platform company. So we need to rethink the role of the European data sources and how to make that happen, and have a trust from the citizens. So public-private partnerships, that's my answer.
Okay, thank you. Jakub?
I was writing some notes. I really like the word trust of citizens, because, well, when we are promoting some ideas from our big data pilot projects in the territory, the point of doing them is have as reliable and accountable public services in place as possible. And it should be done according to the needs of citizens. Well, we map the needs of citizens according to the big data at any source. So in this respect, we promote reliability in the government, in the democracy itself. So in positive belief, we want to do this, but to do it, we need to have some rules not to harm the people's rights. This is very basically said.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jaanika.
Yes, I actually believe in the open market, meaning that I think all of the government data, which is not personal data, which is not commercial secret or state secret, should be open and accessible to everyone in open data formats so that there could be many cool startups, good IT solutions, and open competition available to everyone. In regards to personal data, we should be controlling our personal data and have an access and control mechanisms, not only by saying you have the control, but really the way to see and to control who is using your data, which means to create this also mechanisms to control your private data.
Gabriela, that suggests there's still an agenda for you and your fellow tech companies in addressing these concerns, in persuading the wider audience that you can be trusted.
The topic here is big data and how that can be used for government good and social good. And data can be used for social good, but must be done in a very privacy protective way. That's our core stance, how we are doing that. And as I said in the beginning, we see that the word is not going away from sensitivity on privacy, but the word, our users are going towards privacy and more privacy. So we are developing more privacy-focused products when we are talking about encryption, when we are talking about ephemeral stories, when we are talking about closed user groups, because that seems to be extremely important for the users. I do think that the discussion of big data that started 5-7 years ago, there was a huge enthusiasm. I do feel that now this discussion is significantly different. It's much more privacy-focused and privacy-oriented.
Okay, thank you all very much. I want to thank all of you for your questions on Slido and for your vigorous participation in the discussion. We're very grateful for that. Please join me in thanking our panel. Panel, thank you very much.
Thank you for moderating us. Thank you.
And it might be that the data I've been given is wrong, but my understanding is that we now have a coffee break. Is that correct? Yes, it is. So we will now have a break for coffee, and then your sessions will resume in about 20 minutes or so afterwards. Thank you.